We are now live. Hey, we're live. Hey, welcome to another episode of Live from the No City on the Sideline Dad. Hey, my name is Joe Foley. I want to thank you for being here. Hey, today my guest Marjory Wildcraft from the Grown Network. She's she's a person who's helped people learn how to grow their own food, the medicine, and all kinds of stuff. Welcome to the show, Marjory.
Thanks for having me on again, Joe. Just love hanging out with you.
Well, one thing I was curious about, I know a little bit about you, but some of the audience doesn't know about you. What is the Homegrown Network?
Well, the Grow Network is it's an online community. We're about a 500,000 strong now of people who are stopping the destruction of the earth via homegrown food. And it just turns out that that happens to also make you really prepared for almost anything. So, although none of us would say we're preppers, everybody in the community is. It's these
Mhm.
people that have chosen to live a lifestyle of self-reliance for many years or decades, and yeah, we're having a really good time. Most for the most part, just coming up with like what's the craziest way that you grow mushrooms, or like how big can I make this tomato, or just playing around with stuff and having a good time.
What kind of things they do besides growing food? What other stuff they do in the network?
We also talk a lot about making medicine, especially herbal medicine, also foraging and wildcrafting. So like processing acorns or chestnuts or mesquite beans. Those weeds in your garden
Hmm.
often are better food and more nutritious. Everybody is very interested in nutrition, deep nutrition. How do you get it naturally, not from pills?
Hmm.
So, yeah, and then just general self-reliance skills like how can I build a greenhouse for less than $50? So we have a lot of fun like that.
Well, the one
Also
thing you
talk-
said that was interesting, it made me think for a second about weeds in your garden, and I was thinking about dandelions. I
Mhm.
didn't know you can eat dandelions. Is that true?
Oh yeah, yeah, you sure can. Early in the spring, they're a little better, and then as the season goes on, they get a little more bitter. But it's actually really, really good medicine. So take a dandelion leaf and chew it, eat it before dinner, and that real bitter, which is a taste that is not a normal part of our culture, helps get your digestive juices flowing, and it gets your body ready to digest food. So if you just nibble on a dandelion leaf before eating, you'll get a lot more nutrition and your body will be able to process the food that you eat a lot better. Also, the roots of the dandelion often are pretty big and long. They're pretty awesome roots, actually. Sometimes
Hmm.
if they're hard to get out if you have a real clay soil, but you can dry those and roast those, and they make a great coffee substitute. I actually really love dandelion root coffee. Basically, it's not caffeinated, but it has that nice kind of bitter roasted taste that you like in coffee. It's not quite coffee, but for those of us who are willing to expand our boundaries, it serves the need. Yeah.
I always thought it was like when they grow the dandelions, grow up, and all of a sudden you can blow on them, and then all the seeds go
Isn't that the
everywhere. That's
best? Isn't that the best? The wishing, we used to call them the wishing flowers because when you blew them, you made a wish and that sent the wish out into the universe. Yeah.
well.
The
We're these the reason you've come on tonight. We'll talk about something about what are the five essential preparation for you and for us in 2021 and 20 as right now everybody knows 2020 has been kind of
been
fun
crazy.
and
Yeah.
interesting and crazy.
Yeah.
um what did you think about what the future holds for 2021?
Yeah, let me explain a couple. First of all, in the biggest and broadest terms, what we're going to see is increased globalization and also at the same time increased hyperlocalization. And let me explain a little bit about that. So there's two concepts to get across, and the first is disruption, and we're used to seeing this. And I want to only talk about things that you and I know and can experience because there's so much misinformation and disinformation, and so many people have different attitudes about different things. So, first of all, the Grow Network is non political, non religious, non dietary. So, we have everybody from everywhere. But we've seen disruption going. Well, we weren't alive, but the
Mm.
cotton gin replaced all the guys who picked cotton. Electricity changed so much. My grandmother grew up in New York City, cooked her food on a wood burning stove. There were still horses and buggies, right?
Oh wow.
your average apartment has the equivalent of 22 servants right now because you have things to wash your clothes and dry your clothes and keep your temperature and, cook your food. You don't have to have a wood burning stove. You just turn a knob, right? I mean, we have so many, electricity has done a huge amount, and we're all used to things getting more and more efficient and industries being, I don't know if you remember, but 20 years ago, my business, I lived by my fax machine. I don't even know where a fax machine exists right now, right? Airbnb and Uber completely have taken automobiles that would have sat in idle, or spare bedrooms that would have been idled, and found a way to use those. So that trend of disruption and focus is going to continue, especially with artificial intelligence coming. So that's one force I want to talk about.
Mhm.
And then that's going to collide with another one that I want to talk about, and that is globalization. And so many of us are used to thinking of nation states as being the thing, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
The British Empire, the Roman Empire, the American homogeny, right?
Mhm.
But actually, we now have entities on the planet that are much, much, much more powerful than nation states.
Mhm.
So, Google, for example, has an active Android device in 2.5 billion people's pockets, right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
1/3 of humanity is using a phone. There you go, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, me too. Um, Apple, they're a little behind, 1.5 billion, right? This is
Yeah.
larger than any country. They have way more influence and power. And you can call anywhere in the world that you want, right? I mean, we live in a global world. Um, the oil industries, of course, they're
Yes.
operating all over the world. Banking system, of course, the international bankable settlements, the World Bank. I mean, all the banking is totally interconnected, especially through the U.S. dollar. Even the U.S. military, which we might say, well, that's the United States, it actually is a global power on its own.
Oh wow, I didn't know
It
that.
has bases in 38 countries and employs close to 3 million people. They have their own communications, their own housing, their own transportation. They even have their own language. I don't know if you ever talk to the military guys. They've always got these letters and acronyms. You're like, what? The U.S. military is really a global power.
Mhm.
So most of us are used to thinking of just nation states, but we actually, the media, but most people don't realize that 6 companies own and control all of the planet's media. And that's, when I say media, that's any means of
Yeah.
transferring information:
Mm.
newspapers, televisions, internet, news, entertainment, Hollywood, media, everything. 6 companies globally. So when we saw the pandemic roll out the first part of this year, I had a friend of mine goes, I knew it was a real pandemic because it happened all over the world. And I said, no, what you were actually looking at is the global media. Like, this is the global media. And what we're seeing this year really is that these global powers are flexing their muscles. And regardless of whether you believe there's a pandemic or not, so most irrelevant.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we are going to see going forward, because you can watch the media, and regardless of what is said on any other alternative, they just keep pushing. We got to have vaccines. The case numbers are going up. We're going to have more lockdowns. So one thing, what we can, like, it's definitely going to happen. There's not going to be the W-shaped recovery. They're going to set in place another set of lockdowns. And
Well, I think two things I was interested in you talking about. I know we have more to cover and stuff like that, but disturbance in the like a network, food network, the food networks, like the distribution of that stuff and medication. We were so reliant on international, like China, for example, medication
mhm,
from there. Like I've never seen in my lifetime going to the supermarket and seeing shelves
yeah,
almost bare. I never seen lines out the door like that. It was like a
and that
sci it's like a sci-fi movie.
and that is going to be another thing that you'll see in 2021 that's coming around again. And that what comes with that is going to be food inflation.
Mhm.
Uh, and the reason why, again, is these lockdowns, the pandemic, it's already broken a lot of our just-in-time global food distribution system. One of the other global companies is Cargill, is the world's largest privately held company, and they basically have their hand in almost everything related to food. Um, the supply chains were used to the meat packing houses, for whatever reason, they've been, because of COVID, they've been at way reduced capacity. Farmers on farms have not been. We've also had, this has been the worst year in like 25 years. There was this big derecho, which was a
Mhm.
huge storm that went through Iowa and wiped out like half of
Oh
the
wow.
30 million acres in Hawaii, not Hawaii, Iowa. I'm thinking where I want to go, right? Uh, China and the US is the world's largest grain producing and exporting country. China, which is the second largest producing country, they eat most of their own grain, but they produce the most. They've had severe flooding this year. Brazil is the third largest country, and we're watching. It looks like they may be able to produce a lot more this year, but there are breakdowns happening everywhere. Um, there are some people, there's a guy named Ice Age Farmer who makes a very compelling argument that this is actually being engineered. And again, I was pretty leery of that, and I don't necessarily want to go down that rabbit hole because it's not something I can say for sure I know. But boy, he has some
Yeah.
compelling evidence. But regardless of it, even if you don't want to go down there,
Yeah.
food inflation is coming, and food scarcity is coming. So it's a thing. Medicines, absolutely. I mean, we've already seen that you just go to the medical system and you go, and it like falls apart, So yes, being able to be prepared with your own and the great news is, with all of this, though, the real saving grace, and this is where I was talking about the two forces. One is this globalization.
Hmm.
The other one is hyperlocalization. So, for example, I'm here in Puerto Rico. I've been working with a local group. People are going, hey, we see that there's a problem. So we're already starting to connect up local farmers with local buyers. In fact, tomorrow is going to be a swap. They're going to
Oh
do it
wow.
all like COVID, like everybody's just going to open up their car trunk or tailgate, put their stuff on it, and that way you can walk around and there'll be distancing and all that. We're just going to find an empty street that isn't used very often. But more and more, so one of the other things, one of the other trends that's going to be happening next year with the lockdowns continuing and the whole COVID story going on, we are going to see more and more destruction. We have not yet hit the economic collapse part of this experience. And one simple way that you can feel that and know that to be true is all those remote workers
Yes.
are no longer going to office buildings, and those companies are not going to be renewing those leases, or they may be abandoning those leases. The commercial real estate market is going to absolutely tumble, um, which will have consequences for the banking system. So we'll have another financial crisis. And here in the US, they estimate about 40 million people are set to be foreclosing on their homes, which is back in 2008, it was about 10 million people. So to give you some scale of magnitude of what's coming, I don't want to say that to frighten anybody, but it's to like give you some urgency that yes, you really do need to start taking care of some basic things like food, medicine. Unfortunately, when food prices increase, when more and more people are unemployed, another consequence of that is going to be crime increasing. So you're going to also want to be, like a reason I'm kind of sweating a little bit here
Well, it's
is
one thing that's
I'm
interesting. I wanted to touch something about you said about the. I heard about that people from New York, the people working in the buildings in New York City, were leaving New York City like for southern Connecticut and stuff like that. And myself, who I travel full time for work, I remember I would take me an hour to an hour and a half to get to work. And
uh-huh.
now I can go straight to work in 42 minutes. It's unbelievable the change of the traffic and way people are working. I have a friend who recently I was texting him today. He works for an insurance company. They don't allow him back into the office until April. And that's like insane. It's insane the way that things are going right now.
hmm and the unemployment numbers that they report, like 7% unemployment, that's absolute completely out of, it's sort of like the stock market, which is completely out of touch with reality.
Hmm.
Um, um, a friend of mine has a farm to table restaurant. His mom and his dad grow vegetables and meat, and he has a restaurant, and they, really, really great business, but he can't make it work
Oh,
with the restrictions from the government of half capacity. No restaurant can survive on half capacity. They just can't. Airlines, we're going to see some more consolidation of airlines, because airlines have a minimum. I think it's like they have to have a minimum of 70% occupancy on the
oh,
plane to break even, and that's not been happening. Right? They're
yeah, it's
first of all,
crazy. Yeah, it's
yeah.
crazy
So
because yeah, but stuff like that. It's with the limited capacity, people traveling everywhere. I mean, as the cold weather in the East Coast up north, we've seen a lot of the restaurants are no longer doing outside dining. And
mhm.
I mean, I've seen chains close, like food chains close that normally would be open now. Well, something I felt like the people were already on thin ice. The ice broke for them. That's what it seems like, really, because of the COVID, and it's sad.
Yeah, it really is. And so that's another thing, is to be looking at how you can reinvent yourself.
Hmm.
And quite frankly, that's also part of that hyper localization. We need somebody to organize the farmers markets or something like that. My friend who's really taken the lead on it, she has another job, but she knows that that's not going to be going around for long. So she's creating this new business for herself. Um, all kinds of things that you can do, growing food, or making medicines, or even figuring out how to make old batteries come back to life, or making tire sandals, making shoes out of tires. They last forever. They're great, actually. uh, you know um, how to build a smokehouse, and do that for yourself, and do that for neighbors. How to preserve food. Food is the calorie is going to become the next um, the next basis of our currency, because that's another trend. Is we're all used to the U.S. dollar being like, and it is. I mean, it's really fascinating to me. See, how are we going to deconstruct the world's reserve currency, because the U.S. dollar is clearly
Yeah.
not going to make it, right? And I honestly don't know how it's going to come apart, but definitely some gold. Actually, silver is a much better investment than gold. And
Why
those
is
they
that?
call,
Why is that?
there's much less silver around than there is gold. For so many years, we've been using it, and it ends up in little bits in landfills, because it was used a little bit in this medical device, or a little bit on that electronic piece, or something like that. And we have been mining and extracting much less than we use, year after year after year, for decades. And it's a very little known fact, but definitely do your research. And by the way, I will have a lot of resources in the if people sign up for the what's
What
coming
the
in, the how to prepare
webinar?
for
The webinar you have it on Sunday.
yeah,
Um,
the how to prepare for 2021. I'll have a whole list of resources, and a whole thing I wrote up on why silver is such a much better investment. But another short reason why is those the best form of it are those dimes and quarters and half dollars that were minted before 1963. They're 90% silver, but the cool thing
oh.
is they were minted by the US government, so everybody recognizes them, right? Like, you won't have a problem, and they're a small denomination, so uh, it's easier to trade with. um,
But I
People
found that
ask.
interesting. I found that
Yeah.
interesting too. You talk about the chains and the silver and stuff like that, and the coins and stuff like that. But it seems like this is the first time I've ever seen a coin shortage ever in my lifetime too.
Yeah, I don't know. I really wonder about that. That's totally crazy. Like, that doesn't, why should there be a short coin shortage? I really don't understand that. So,
I mean, it's not
uh,
somebody putting dollar bills into the change maker or the laundromat stealing the coins. I'm like, I've never seen because I mean, our currency seems to be going towards less people have cash, more people use electronic currency.
mhm.
I
And
mean,
there are conversations out there that that's very intentional. I honestly don't know, but if everything moves to a digital currency, then everything can be monitored and controlled. Is the conversation about that?
mhm.
I, again, I try to stick with what I can really see and experience, and what I know for sure. The Federal Reserve is creating an account for every American, and you can go. I think it's called the Fed Now system.
Hmm.
Um, and they're working on that. And one of the ideas there is they'll be able to send you money directly to
Okay.
your account there. And if they want to control inflation or deflation or whatever, they would just say, "Hey, here's Joe. Here's your $1,200 stimulus check, but it's going to expire in 60 days, so you have to spend it."
Well,
So,
yeah,
like
it's been a
give me,
very
yeah.
yeah,
I'm
it's very
like, hey,
helpful. What's that?
you give me $1,200. You don't have to worry. I'll spend it before
Oh
60
yeah,
days.
definitely. I'm already thinking about $1,200 right now, how I can spend it. I
Right.
mean, and it's also interesting too. The what's coming 2021 seems doesn't seem it's not that far away, but
No.
2020 seems like it's been a roller coaster and everything like that. One thing you mentioned, what is some you talk a lot about currency and stuff like that. What kind of background you have in that? I was kind of curious.
Well, I used to be a professional money manager, and I was a student of Robert Kiyosaki before he was famous for Rich
Mhm.
Dad Poor Dad. And I set up a real estate investment business. It was actually my second career. My first career, I was an electrical engineer. But I set up a really successful investment business in Austin, Texas. And in fact, it was so successful, Robert asked me to be a testimonial on his infomercials that he did
Oh
with
wow.
Time Life. Yeah. And what happened was, if you're going to be successful in real estate, you're going to be using OPM, which is other people's money. And and I knew where my investors' money was coming from, but my biggest partner was actually Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I mean, we were borrowing millions of dollars, and I was like, I should really look at their business model now. And then I was like, oh my God, we are in big trouble. So I basically foresaw what would happen in 2008, and I got out of. I got all of my investors out. Some of them were really pissed off at me, but later they came back and thanked me profusely because they're like, we can't believe you're shutting down the portfolio. You're making so much money. And I'm like, we got to get out. I'm sorry, it's over. This is not going to be, I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's not sustainable. But 2008 wasn't it. I mean, I could totally see that there would be a global and what the terms that is being bandied around now by the World Economic Forum, a global reset, that there would be a collapse of the US dollar, that there would be major changes on the planet, that there would be fundamental, like we may even be seeing the end of capitalism, actually, what this may ultimately result. But going back to the very beginning of this conversation,
Hmm.
when I was talking about globalization, we may and how the forces of disruption and continued efficiency we've seen that as a huge trend. All of us have experienced it. Well, what is one of the most inefficient, bloated organizations that you can think of on the planet? And that would have to be government. And there I very much see that these global powers that now have more power are going to be dismantling a lot of our governmental systems. I don't know how much of that is going to happen in 2021, but that seems to me a very clear um, path of where we're going that may actually roll out in years after that. Um, so anyway, yes, I used to be a professional investor, and I knew when 2008 came that that was not it. That
Hmm.
was big, but it was not it. And so I said, well, what could I do to prepare, and what could be something. There's going to be massive unemployment. There's going to be massive change. What is something that people can do, the average person could do, that would be positive, that would be proactive, that would really be helpful, that would stabilize the situation? There must be something. And to be honest with you, I wasn't thinking about growing food, right? I used to sign, $100,000 checks, $1 million checks. I mean, I
Hmm.
was like, what could it be? What could it be? And I'll tell you a quick story but I did know that food was going to be a big problem. And I got, as a part of volunteering with this group, that we were going to get organic food at the local elementary school. And we were going to roll it out throughout Texas. And we were all excited. I was meeting with this group and we were going to make this happen. And then the whole project failed because we found out that there was not enough food growing in the entire county to
Oh,
provide vegetables for one small elementary school. And when I realized, that Austin to the west had about a million, Houston to the east had about 4 million, Dallas and San Antonio to the north and south each had 3 million. And I was sitting in the middle of this, and there's no food. There's only 4 days worth of food supply in the grocery store. We've all experienced empty shelves and seen how that could happen. I could not stop shaking
Oh,
for hours. I mean, I just kept shaking because I realized what could happen. And then that was what I said, I've got to learn to grow food. And then I realized that was the thing that I had been looking for, was that's the thing that people can do that can empower themselves. The saving grace in this entire situation is that you can still source almost everything you need, and you only need a backyard sized piece of land. And even if you don't have that, there's still a lot you can do.
was one thing I found interesting too, and especially this year with the different climate change and stuff like that. This is the first year I've ever seen the droughts that we had. I live in New Hampshire. We were in severe droughts and stuff like that. Driving by water reservoirs, they're not completely empty, but man, they were pretty damn close.
It's been a really tough year. And here's another, again, I don't know this for certain, but it makes sense when you look at the extent of the global powers that I've been talking about.
Hmm.
There's a lot of indication that they have, it totally makes sense that they would want to develop tools where they could manipulate the weather. I mean, weaponization of weather has got to be a military guy's, wet dream. I mean, I don't, can we talk about that on this kind of a show?
And that's
Anyway,
that's fine.
but um, yeah, we're seeing some insane, that whole derecho I was talking about. People are like, that's never happened here. We're seeing all kinds of weather anomalies. Now, the way I look at that is we are, and I feel so honored to be alive right now. I mean, I know it's chaotic. I know a lot of people are hurting, and a lot more people are going to be hurting because they're not ready for this change. And it's massive change, and people don't generally do well with massive change. But it's such an honor. This is not something we've ever gone through. I mean, this is not the Great Depression. It's something bigger than that. This is not like the collapse of the Roman Empire. This is something really, really, really massive, and it's happening fairly quickly. This is going to roll out over this decade, and we're going to get to live through that and experience it and see it and participate in it. And it's going to be very messy. So that's absolutely why you want to start learning to grow food, want to start learning to make your own medicine. Definitely start figuring out a new employment or income source for yourself. Do the best you can to get some finances together for gold or silver or tools or backup food or cryptos. You want to definitely get out of the US dollar and start looking at some alternatives to that. um, yeah, and I would say the biggest thing is attitude, right? So
Attitude's important.
I've I've been, after that happened to me with the elementary school project, that thing completely fell apart. I had panic attacks. I could not sleep. I lost a lot of relationships really deteriorated. I mean, I could not be consoled. And the way out of that really was to take proactive action on what I could do. And that was make a garden and have some chickens. And I know it sounds so humble, right? And I'm seriously, I was like structuring multi-million-dollar deals, and I had all kinds of stuff going on. I was so, and then like, you got to be kidding me! Like a flock of 6 chickens is going to be, and yes, a chickens and a garden and some fruit trees. It really does completely change your life. So I know it sounds so humble and so simple, but it's the answer. And I will tell you, it's true, because I have been in that dark hole, and that is the way out.
Well, you said about attitude too, especially with the time of everybody's going through all the stuff like, um, loss of jobs or loss of
Mhm.
income, and trying to find food and stuff. It's kind of hard sometimes too because you get into that mental darkness and depression. And how do you think sometimes how people can just maybe reach out for help, maybe like motivate themselves?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I start taking proactive action on some aspect of your life that you can control. So, figure out some way to get a garden going, or figure out some way to get some chickens. And if you can't, go volunteer. at a farm, or go volunteer somewhere. I've found when I've been the most depressed or sad, I'm all focusing on myself, and if I get outside of myself and focus on helping somebody else, it's transformative. The other thing is really, if you think about in your own past, some of your darkest times or your toughest teachers or the biggest trials, when you went through them, it wasn't fun. But when you came through it, when you were done and you looked back and you were like, wow, I grew so much, or I became so much more compassionate, or I'm now much wiser, or I'm stronger. I mean, you realize the value of those really, really tough times. The other thing is this is not going to last that long. It really isn't. I mean, for some of us, people might go, well, a couple of years or a decade is a long time. It's not a long
One
time.
time, no.
It's not really. I mean, this is not going to last forever. And your grandchildren are going to be real curious about this. Like when my mom and my grandmom, I was always asking them about the Great Depression. What was it like growing up in that time period, or World War II? What was that like? Because for the
Well,
most part, most times are pretty good, right? So your grandchildren are going to want to know about this. By the way, I really recommend everybody journal and
mhm.
write what's going on. Your opinion and what you see is really important. Some of the most valuable writings that I've been reading were from the Civil War.
Yep.
What did people do during that time, especially in the South? So your contribution is really valuable, and your family's gonna really appreciate that, as well as future historians.
Well, also too, you have a webinar coming up. I don't know if you want to talk a little about that, what that's all about.
Yeah, that's how to prepare for 2021.com, right? That URL is not going to be valuable for much longer. Um, and I'm going to go over again some more on some of these forces, how they play together. And I'll have a whole lot of specific resources. I'll have that link on why silver is so much better. We have a whole bunch of resources on how business ideas for you to get started, reinventing yourself, a lot of resources on how to grow food and how to get start, making medicine, as well as the Grow Network is a very upbeat, positive, action-oriented community. It's a good community to get involved in. We don't allow politics. We don't get into fighting over anything. We just all focus on solutions. And so it's a great group of people to hang out with, very positive, and sharing a lot of resources and activities. So how to prepare for 2021, there'll be a list of resources there. We'll go in depth more on these forces and how the world is changing. Um, and yeah, it's a great webinar. So yeah, how to prepare for 2021.com. What a
It's no,
crazy.
it's November 15th on November
Uh,
15th.
at 2 p.m. Central, and then we will. But if they sign up there, I promise you, we'll do what we have to do to remind you all the time. I know I need it when I sign up for a webinar. They got to keep Marjory. Go to the webinar now. I think we'll do our best to have a replay too. So if people can't make it, if they sign up, we'll definitely stay in touch with them and get them what they need.
Marjory Wildcraft, thank you much for being on the show today. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for being on the live show today, so the podcast. I really do appreciate that too. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, that's it for the live episode. Thank you much for joining us today. Until next time, take care. God bless. See ya. And